Good morning.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Terumais, Perek Aleph. We're still up to Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Davav. We left off on Davav Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top of the Amud by the 2 dots, and the Gemara is referring back now to the 5th case of the Chamisha Lo Yitraimu, even post facto, that Ve'im Tarmu Ein Trumas and Truma, and that is a Nachri, a Nanju, Shetaram Es Shel Yisrael. So we're going to have today a very classic Gemara, and that will be, we're going to learn the source, or at least one of the sources of Shlichus. Really, in the Bavli, we had the Sugya in Kedushin Daf Mem Aleph, as people remember. One source will actually be from Truma, and it's amazing that yesterday we quoted the pasuk in Parshas Koirach, Kein Torimu Gam Atem, Trumas Hashem, etc., and we had 3 lemudim from the word Atem, right? Because we said that the Torah could have written Kein Torimu Trumas Hashem. That pasuk again is referring to the Levi, that after the Levi receives his Meiser Rishon, which is 10% from what remained after the separation of Truma Gedolah. So Hashem commands the Levi that just like the Yidden are obligated to separate a Meiser, which is how you got your Meiser, is Kein Torimu Gam Atem Trumas Hashem, which is exactly the same amount in percent, that from what the Levi gets, the Levi has to give 10% to the coin. Trumas Meiser. So we said yesterday that the Gam Atem is superfluous, and today we're going to take a limud from the same pasuk and saying that even after the Torah writes the word Atem, Kein Torimu Atem Trumas Hashem, you don't have to have the word Gam. So we're going to see that from the word Gam, first of all, we learn about Shlichus, Shliach Shal Adam Kamoisai. Furthermore, Gam means that the Shliach has to be like the principal, and that is, as I'll understand, Ma Atem B'nei Bris, Af Shluchachem B'nei Bris, okay, which means that who could serve as an agent, who could be a Shliach, a Jew. A non-Jew halachically cannot be an agent on the level of shlichus as we have by a Yid. And then we're going to have a machlokas amoraim, and that will be, what about, could the goy appoint someone to be a shliach? So according to everyone, the limud of ma'atem b'nei bris, af shluchachem b'nei bris, excludes a goy from being a shliach. Could the goy be a mishaleach? Could the goy appoint? We'll see there's a machlekas amiroim. We're going to have the opinion of Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai, and after we work out some of that argument, the rest of the daf will be 2 other very important statements, generally Truma related, also from Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai, and a lot of it will be around something that we discussed in the previous Masechta and in 2 Masechtas ago, which is that even though the ideal, the way you separate Truma and Meiseres is that the owner separates Truma, gives it to a coin. The owner separates Meiser Rishon, gives it to a Levi. And the Levi separates from the Levi's Meiser Rishon 10% and gives that to a coin. The original owner, according here in our Gemara, we are quoting Rabbi Yossi. Really in the Bavli, we also quote Atana. But let's go that Rabbi Yossi holds that Bidi Eved, the original owner, Yisrael, can already separate from the Meiser Rishon 10% and give it to a Kohen, even prior to him giving the Meiser Rishon to a Levi. In other words, it's not that the Levi has to be the one, or the Levi is the only one that could separate from the Meiser Rishon 10% and give it to the Kohen. The original owner separates Meiser Rishon. Let's say that will be 10 apples. Anyways, from the 10 apples, 1 apple the Levi can't keep. The Levi will have to give to a Kohen. The original owner can separate the 1 from the 10, Meiser min ha-Meiser, Trumas Meiser, and give it to a Kohen, even prior to him giving the remaining 9 to a Levi. And we're going to see how that will play itself out in various halachas as we will discuss those today. Davav Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. And let us go right in, the 5th case of those who are unfit to separate Truma, and that is Nachri Shetaram Eshal Yisrael. The 4th case of the Mishnah is, right, Hatoidem Es She'ena Shaloi. But that means that he had no permission. He was not asked to do it. But if he was asked to do it, then he could do it. A goy, even if the owner asked the goy to separate trumas for him, and the goy did it the way it should be done, it's ineffective. It's ineffective because the shlichus, the instrument of shlichus, does not apply to a non-Jew. Parenthetically, in halacha, sometimes we say yesh shlichus la'akum l'chumra as an example, the kipsak of the Alter Rebbe, that one of the reasons, right, for amira la'akum, why is it that on Shabbos midirabanan, that which I may not do, I cannot tell a goy to do, and midirabanan, even if I did not tell the goy to do it at all, I didn't even hint it to him. If he did something exclusively for me, generally, I cannot derive benefit from it. Why not? Because yesh shlichus la'akum l'chumra. But we're not talking about rabbinically, and even midrabanan, we don't say shlichus la'akum in all areas of halacha. We say it specifically when it comes to Shabbos. We're machmir over there. But as a rule, again, nachri shatanim eshal Yisrael, it won't be effective. Okay. So says the Gemara. Rabbi Ze'eda, and Rabbi Acha, and Rabbi Yasa, and here we go, Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai, and by the way, the whole daf today will be about other statements from Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai. And another thing just to say about that when you learn the Gemara, the way we're learning it quickly, that's enough of a link. In other words, we find this throughout Bavli a lot. You're going to see the Gemara quotes someone's making a statement, and then for some reason they decided to compile many other statements made by the same Amoira. What's the connection of content between one statement and the other? Many people say there doesn't have to be a connection. The truth is it's not that way. The truth is that when the Gemara is giving you many statements from the same, the fact that the Gemara puts it together means that not only is it because the same person said it, but because the content of those statements are very much connected. But anyways, let's come back over here. So what is the first statement? So even though we already learned yesterday, that's the way I understand they're wording it this way, why the Torah needed to say the word atem, because really in Parshas Koirach, the Torah could have said, Kein Torimu Trumas Hashem. Gam and atem are superfluous. But atem, we already learned yesterday. Atem, not shutfim. Atem, not a petrupsin, right? Atem, not hatoidem es she'eno shaloi, that we already learned. Okay, but even though the Torah needs to write atem to teach you everything that we learned yesterday, but gam remains superfluous because the Torah could have written kein torimu atem trumas Hashem. Why gam? Gam atem, that's the way the Chazal word it. Atem would have been enough. What's the gam? What's the gam atem? You too. So we are, you too, or you also, is an inclusionary word. You got it? So who, in other words, there's someone in addition to you who is able to separate Truma. And who might that be? L'Rabbi shluchachem, shliach shel adam k'moisei. Shliach shel adam k'moisei itself, as the Rav Yosef Engel, which the Rebbe quotes so
it's a bit of contradiction. If it's kemoso as is you, is him.
So to address what Yakir is saying, that when it comes to shlichus, there are three different ways of understanding how shlichus functions. Let me just give you the extremes. One is that when I do something, then I did it. When you do it, you did it. You and I are two different people. Elama, if I halachically appointed you to be my proxy, and we're not going to get into right now how that works, but I can appoint you. That has to be how I appoint you. I can appoint you and I can nullify that appointment also. There's a whole Torah of shlichus. But when you will be considered my shliach, either what you did will be attributed to me, and that answers Yakir's question. Me and you are not the same. Or the other extreme is that whenever we apply shlichus, we halachically view you and I to be the same. That's the meaning of the word shliach shel adam is kemoisai, or kemoisai mamish, like him, like the principal. It's like I have a hand. when I do something or my hand did something, it's not two different things. I did it. What do you mean I did? My hand did it. No, your hand is you. Shliach is me. That will be what Yakir is asking. So then it's not even gamatem. Well, that's the whole limud. The limud is that even though physically it's a gam, it's someone else, it's you too, but halachically it's not you too. You and I are the same. Okay, let's go back inside. Now, furthermore, now that we have gam and atem, this is called a classic hekish. You and me, you atem is you, and also the shliach. So we also say that the principal and the agent have to be similar. How? Again, Chazal understood that means ma atem b'nei bris. One of the ways we classify or we categorize a Jew is someone who's a member of the covenant. B'nei bris, af shluchachem b'nei bris. So the whole source of shlichus comes from gam atem. That already excludes someone who's not similar, dissimilar. Gam atem, you and also someone else. If the you and that someone else are not the same, one is a Jew. The principal is a Jew. Let's begin with that. And the agent is a non-Jew. He cannot be a shliach.
You can extend that to Russian.
No, we don't. B'nei bris. Now comes along Rabbi Yanai, and he says that we don't only exclude the goy of being a shliach, we exclude a goy of being able to appoint a shliach. Two different limudim. Many people, maybe it's just myself, when you go to yeshiva young and you learn kedushin and they knock it into your head, so people remember, by me it's girsa de yankis, agam atem, ma'atem b'nei bris, af shluchachem b'nei bris. But the emphasis is always excluding a goy from becoming the agent. Can a goy appoint someone to be a shliach? Now, where would that be relevant? I'm going to give you an example right away from this case. And for that, let's quickly review something that we learned a lot in the previous Masechta and before that. When a non-Jew owns land in the Holy Land, there's a machloikis tanoim, various on one side, various on the other side. Some goyim, some tanoim lahavdal are of the opinion that yesh kinyin la'akum be'eretz Yisrael lahafkia min hamaisres, which means that even though produce that grows in the Holy Land has to be tithed, if a non-Jew owns the land, and we're speaking about, and not only does he own the land, but therefore what comes out of the land he owns, and he brought it up until the smoothing of the pile. All of that was while it was owned by a non-Jew. His ownership removes the obligation of the produce to be tithed. Which means if a Jew buys the produce from the goy after the meruach, none of it has to be tithed. Other Tanoim are of the opinion, and that will be my example for here, is that ein kinyan la'akum be'eretz Yisrael hafkiya min ha'maisres. Just because he owns it, of course, a goy doesn't have to keep the mitzvahs. God did not command the goy to separate trumas and maisres, but the product is a product that has to undergo the separation of trumas and maisres, which would mean that when a Jew buys it, a Jew has to separate the trumas and maisres. Now, on that opinion, if a goy, think about a businessman, not the keep, a goy is in the clients are Jews. He knows that the Jews have to separate trumas and maisres. You know what would be a great service from the non-Jewish owner? He would separate the trumas and maisres. He's not obligated to do it, but like this, and and you make sure you have the right hashgacha. So when you buy it, it's already separated. Could that goy ask a Jew to do it on his behalf? I'm just giving you an example. So that's the limud of Rabbi Yanai, that only atem oisem shliach.
If he can,
let me just read the words. This is gavaldik. In other words, the exclusion of a goy in the halacha of shlichus isn't only when the goy is the shliach, it's also if the goy chooses to be a mishaleach. Now, who is he sending, a Jew or a goy? The Gemara will speak in a moment. Rabbi Yanai categorically excludes the goy from shliach, whether he is the agent or whether he's the one sending the agent, whether he's the principal. I'm sorry, I interrupted someone.
No, Rabbi, just a quick question. In this scenario, according to these opinions, that the produce requires to be tithed, even though it's owned by the non-Jew.
Yes.
Does he himself, the guy, is the one that's actually doing that?
He could. Why not? Why he could? Yeah.
So he's making a separation of tevel. He's calling it truma, and now that has the designation of truma from a non-Jew.
That's right. I want to say, we mentioned in the beginning of the Masechta, which is just a few daf ago, that on some level, truma is like a vow. That's why we said that even a minor, right? Nevertheless, if he's mufla samach leish, he can separate truma. Do you know that a goy and vows nedarim are like korbanos? Actually, one of the classic words that people used for a neder was koinam, carbon, because you're saying this is like a carbon. You're being matvasit bedavar. Not that a chazir, that wouldn't work. Remember that whole sugya? I can't say that this food is like a chazir because chazir is inherently prohibited. But if I'm saying that this is like a carbon, that's the best way of making a neder. Goyim can give karbanos. Goyim can designate karbanos. Also, b'hashgacha pratis, we're learning today, a few days before Tisha B'Av. That's the whole sugya over there of kamsa bar kamsa, how the Roman generals separated a carbon. And we bring the carbon on their behalf. There's certain restrictions to what point may a goy go on harabayas. But which karbanos? Not all of the karbanos, but yeah, yes, Danny.
In the article, it doesn't say goy; it just keeps saying idolater, not a non-Jew. Are we making a distinction with someone who believes in God versus a non-believer?
So throughout a general rule, it's not about believing in God or not. B'nai Bris makes that very clear. B'nai Bris, by the way, doesn't mean someone who physically has a circumcision. B'nai Bris means someone who's obligated to be circumcised, and that is specifically referring to a Jew. Elamah, when there were certain censors that they would take out lines of the Gemara if we would make our Havdalah between Yisrael la'amim. So the way we circumvented that, it was by writing idolaters. And then if we were living in a society where they were already rejected paganism, so then they would understand it that we're not talking about them. We're talking about idolaters, avodas, but it's really b'nai bris. Okay, to make it clear. Are we going to be censored right now according to the American culture? Probably we're just on that point right now. All right. Rabbi Yossi, Savar Meimar. Oh, so Rabbi Yossi is going to limit the exclusion the way Rabbi Yanai understood it. Guys, everyone understands, everyone agrees that a goy cannot be a shliach ever, halachically, midoiraisa. But the second statement of Rabbi Yanai, that atem oisem shliach, the ein hagoy oisa shliach, we're going to now machlokes amiroim, whether we limit that or whether it's categorical. Rabbi Yossi Savar Meimar, ein goy oisa shliach, only if he is sending begoy acher chaveroi, if he is sending another non-Jew. Ho be Yisrael, but if a non-Jew wants to appoint, and he appoints, verbally he appoints a Jew, then he's able to do so. Coming back to my example, when a guy is choosing, he's not chayiv, but he knows anyways, the Jew, the client, will have to separate tithing according to those opinions. Let me do it for him. It's a service. He'll buy it from me because it's already done. And he doesn't want to do it. He's busy. He's over there another. He appoints a Jew to do it, then he could do it. Amalei Rab Ze'era to Rabbi Yosei Nishnisht Minei Uminei Minei Uminei. I love it. Not Minei Ubei, Minei Uminei. Different expressions. Atem Oisem Shliach. When you can make a shliach. Now, who is the you that can make a shliach? Let's go to the beginning of the limud. Is it not talking about a Jew? Yeah, and only Loi be Yisrael. So when we are now extending it, and we're saying Ein Hagoy Oisa Shliach, it also means he cannot appoint even a Jew as his Shliach, Afilu be Yisrael. According to this understanding,
a non-Jew has to do his own separating. He
Very
can't have
good.
anybody else do it.
Yeah, clear.
That's what we're learning.
Very clear, yes. Or in any other area in which something has to be done by the principal. Elama, only because of shlichus, you can get away with someone else doing it on your behalf. It wouldn't work. Very good. Hosiv Rabbi Shaya. Now Rabbi Shaya is defending Rabbi Yossi. He's challenging Rab Ze'era. Masnisa Misaye Rabbi Yossi. I have a braisa that backs up Rabbi Yossi, which Rabbi Yossi doesn't always exclude a guy from being able to appoint. He just says a goy cannot appoint a goy, but he can appoint a Jew. Now, what is this brisa referring to? So even though this is common, especially in the Yerushalmi, we're beginning in the middle. So according over here, a brisa, which is specifically a Tosefta, and to know what we are talking about. So look inside the Pnei Moshe. Let's make it today a Pnei Moshe day. Pnei Moshe, the second to last narrow line. So even though the Pnei Moshe, b'divrei hamaschel is Omar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, but to appreciate what he's saying, we would like to know what the Chachamim are saying. So this is a Tosefta that we have in the beginning of the 6th chapter of the Mai that we learned together. And the Tani Sham we learned over there, Hamakabel Sadam in Ha'akum. Guys, Hamakabel means an uris. That's what it means over here. It means someone who's a sharecropper. They don't own the land. They work the land and they get a certain percent of. Ma'asir v'noisen loi. The Tanakama holds that he separates maasros from the entire field. In other words, clearly the Chachamim hold that a Jew who's an uris is able to not only separate the Trumas Maasros from his share, for his share, but he can separate it for the whole field. Let's go further. Now, Omar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Let's keep on reading in the Pnei Moshe, guys. This is the first line under the Gemara. Uma im yirtza hagoy hazeh sheloi litrem ula aser peiroisev eno toirem elo cholik v'roisev b'fanav. Doesn't make sense to say. You, the Chachamim say that the Jew, the others, has to tithe everything. Why? Why does he have to? Some of it is his. Yes, I as a Jew, I'm chayiv to separate Trumas Maasros from my produce. But from the chelik that belongs to the owner, just like the owner himself doesn't have to do it, he's a goy, he's not obligated to do it, even according to the opinions that say that ein kinyan la'akum be'eretz Yisrael la'havkiya. That means that the produce, at some point, if it will be owned by a Jew, that will have to be tithed. But the owner, the goy, doesn't have to do it. So that's that. Let's read it inside the Gemara. So how can you say that? How can you say that? What? That the Jew does it for everyone, even if you say ein kinyan la'akum la'havkiya doesn't. But the goy, the owner, is not obligated to do it. So says the Gemara, says Rabbi Hoshaya, that even according to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, for sure according to the Chachamim, he only challenges the Chachamim by saying, how can you say that he's obligated to do it? He's not obligated to do it. Because the goy can say, I don't want to do it. But that already implies that if the goyish owner tells his Jewish sharecropper, you know what? The market is a Jewish market. You have to separate from do it for me, then he could. Ha imroitza, then toid him. So that implies from the Braisa that a Jew can be a shliach of a goy. We have a limud atem oisem shliach ve'ein hagoy oisa shliach. Fine, but like Rabbi Yossi says, atem ein hagoy oisa shliach means a goy cannot appoint another goy as his shliach, but a goy could appoint a Jew as a shliach. So now this, by the way, this is a proof to Rabbi Yossi. Why would this not refute Rabbi Ze'era? So Rabbi Abba Omar. No. We had this here 2 days ago. Rabbi Abba says maybe. When we are inferring from Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who says you can't obligate the sharecropper to separate it, which implies, but if the owner wants, he could do it. Well, maybe that's only bima amein al yadav. We had those words 2 days ago. Literally, that means that if the Jew and the goy are doing it together, literally you would think means only when one is holding the hand of the other. Doesn't mean it that way only. It means that if the goy participates in the separation of the Jew, which would make so much sense. No, it's maybe a goy cannot even appoint a Jew to be a shliach. So when the owner tells the sharecropper, you know what, separate tithings for me, that in itself is not enough. But the Jew separates approximately 2%. Then he separates exactly the 10%. Comes along the owner, and the owner participates with him. So he asked the Jew, you do the legwork for me. The Jew could do 99% of the physical separation, but you have to have the goy, the owner, doing some of it. Then remember that was with the father, with the son. That when you participate or when you add to what someone else is doing, then you don't need the shlichus to make it work. That's already more than shlichus.
Question, Rabbi, I'm
doing
sorry.
It together. Yes.
If a Jew has a partner who's a non-Jew, and the non-Jew decides not to pay to do his teruma, can he ever do it since it belongs to both of them? The property, the
So that's
wheat.
Kevin, that's what we're just speaking about.
But I'm saying,
Well, I
is
want to
he
say it like
stuck
this:
forever?
if a guy owns something for him to consume, he'll never want to do it. Why would he want to do it?
So what does the Jew do? He's stuck forever.
We're speaking about a just practice. We're speaking about a goyish owner, no, that has a field, has a farm for business, and if Jews are customers, it will be at his advantage. You know how many goyim today sell kosher food? They don't have to eat kosher, but they want the kosher market. So first of all, so now the question is, can a goy? That's the question. Can a goy appoint a Jew to do it on his behalf? So there's a machlokes. Rabbi Yossi says absolutely yes. Rabbi Zajac is saying no, but no doesn't mean kevan that the owner has to do the whole thing by himself. If someone gave an example yesterday, 2 days ago, of bishul akum by the Ashkenazim, that was a great example. What a Jew has to cook. No, you can have a goy that's cooking, but you figure out how the Jew does something. That's the ma'amen al yo. You do something, so it's not bishul akum. That will be the word over here. Okay, now let's go on. It's late.
And then it's not al shlichus. It's just al
not al shlichus. The ma'amen al yod is more than shlichus. Yeah. For sure not. For sure not. Okay. Next statement. Guys, this is a gewaldige case. Listen to what happened over here. Listen to the story. Yisrael she'amar leLevi, a Jew, tells a Levi, Nesanel is getting excited, that koir maser yesh lecha biyadi. Understand how the wording works. That means, let's say I have, that's a big quantity. I have a big field. I have a lot of produce, and I separated Truma Gedoyla. I'm up to the phase of my sedition. I know now my sedition has to be exact. I know that I will have a whole koir of my sedition, and I have to give it to a Levi. I get to choose which Levi to give it to. So imagine I already separated it. I did not give it to anyone yet. I'm verbally committing to give it to you. I'm telling you, you know what? You have a koir in my possession. In other words, the my sedition will be given to you. Now, Nisanel, listen to what's happening, already has in his house 9 other koirs of my sedition. With this, how much will you have? 10. You are going to be obligated to give meiser min ha-meiser. You will have to give from your 10, 1 to a coin. So when you heard me committing to give my card to you, you know what you said? You went and said, V'holach oise ben Levi, and he says, Gavaldik. Avrameir, the koir that's in my property, I didn't give it to you yet. You, the Levi, you're making that into Trumas Meiser. You're not even going to take it, but you're designating this to be Trumas Meiser. What did you accomplish? The 9 that you have in your house, now you can eat. When you got 9 from many other people, you didn't yet separate Trumas Meiser. You cannot do anything with it yet. Now that you heard you got a 10th, perfect. But instead of you getting it and giving it, you're saying, Gavaldik, the one that I committed to give to you, you, Nisanel, the Levi, is transforming into Trumas Meiser. Va'asoi, Trumas Meiser al Makom Acher. The Makom Acher happens to be in your property already. Now, one second. I did nothing yet. I just made a commitment. What did I do now? V'holach Yisrael, went along the Jew. I have in my house a koir. As far as I know, this koir is my sedition. You, the Levi, made it into Trumas Meiser. I ignored your statement. I changed my mind. And I go ahead and I give my koir to another Levi, to the Bal Koira, all of the Aliyahs. Oh, so now, what's the halacha? You, Nisano, the most right you have the right to complain. This is when you hear it the first time, everyone smiles. In other words, you have the right to complain. At least you have the right to complain. No, it's not that your complaint will have any koyach. And by the way, it should make a lot of sense. Why should why should this make a lot of sense? How did we end the whole Masechta Shvius? That even though a person should keep their word, but prior to a kinyan happening, even though when I told Nisanel, the koir is yours, I am ethically obligated to give it to you 100%, but it's not yours yet. I didn't give it to you yet. So since it's not yours, you transforming it into Trumas Meiser is ineffective, because how can you make it into Trumas Meiser if it's not yours yet? And therefore it's still Meiser Ishain. I can give it to, I shouldn't, but if I give it to another Levi, you have the right to have a taina. But more than that, there's nothing you can do. Now, this makes a lot of sense. The problem is the Gemara limits that. Says the Gemara, no, it's not the way it sounds. Like when I learned it yesterday, Gavaldik, that can make sense. Says the Gemara, Hadod the Tema, when is that true? That what? That the Yisrael can give it to another Levi recipient. That's only prior to Nasanel's statement that he made it into Trumas Meiser. In other words, even though you were planning to do it, you didn't do it yet. But if the first Levi made it into Trumas Meiser, you make it by a verbal declaration. You don't need to do more than that. If you you said it is, not it will be. I have 9 in my house. Oh, now you're happy. Now I'm getting a 10th. Perfect. Why do you don't schlep it to me? I don't know if that will be the Trumas Meiser. In the Vilo, what I have in my house, if you already made that separation, I, the owner, I cannot change the recipient of the Meiser Ishin. You know why? Because it's not Meiser Ishin anymore. It already became Trumas Meiser. Now, hold on. The question is, how? Didn't we just say a logical statement that if I make a commitment to give a gift, even though ethically I should keep my word, but no kinyan happened, so it's not yours yet. And if it's not yours yet, even if you made the declaration it's Trumas Meiser, it should be ineffective. So how does that go? Says the Gemara, Vigatus. But before we ask how, the Gemara actually is going to actually prove that the qualification is accurate. And that is kahada de masnisa. That fits with that which we will learn, my friends, in the Mishnah below, in our pagination of Daf Chav Zayin. Says the Mishnah, here we're speaking about someone who appoints a shliach, person making chaos. Imagine, Aviv, I appoint you to be my shliach. To what? To separate truma. Prior to you actually separating truma, I nullify the shlichus, whether you know it or not. And you physically separate truma. If I nullified your shlichus prior to you separating truma, then you cannot separate truma on my behalf. And if you did it, it's nothing. It's ineffective. But if I appointed you to be my shliach and you separated truma, and then I nullified the agency, it's too late. That bitel, if the principal nullified the appointment of the agent who was sent to separate truma, so the Mishnah says very simple: if he nullified the shlichus prior to the shliach separating of the truma, and the shliach then separates the truma, but he did it after his shlichus was nullified, ain't truma say truma. But if you aviv, you separated it, who knows? God knows. No, I nullified it. I can nullify it even though you're not there. You did what you were told to do. I made a nullification. If my bittul happened after you separated truma, then truma say truma. Now it's amazing the Gemara's logic. So the Gemara is saying, just like we find in the Mishnah, that if after truma was separated, the original owner cannot change anything, here also, logically, that once the Levi Nesanel already made my koir, which I committed to give to you, into Trumas Meiser, once it's Trumas Meiser, it's not my sedition anymore. If it's not my sedition, there's nothing, I cannot give it to another Levi, because it's already Trumas Meiser. But the Gemara says, doesn't make sense. This is really putting salt on the wound. How can you compare one case to the other? Here, I own the Truma. Aviv doesn't own the Truma. I just made you into my Shliach. So if the Shlichus is standing, you can do it. If the Shlichus is nullified, you can't do it. Once you did it, it's done. I get that. But over here, there's no Shlichus here. I made a commitment to give it to you, but it's not yours. So frek the Gemara v'kula minei, that goes on you, on Nasan of the Levi. Is it in the first Levi's power to make it into Trumas Meiser? L'chu'ur, it should not be. It's only a commitment. It's only a promise, but it's not yours. So the Gemara says, no, that's not true. Mikiven she'amar lo'koir maaser yesh l'cha biyadi. Once I make that statement, included in my commitment, which is only a commitment, not kinyan, to give you the Meiser Rishon, included in that, I appointed you to be my shliach. Nase shluchai. What kind of shliach? Here we go. So let's repeat what we said in the intro. Now, who separates Trumas Meiser? So like we said before, normally, I'm the Yisrael. I separate Truma, G'doyla, I give it to a Kohen. I separate Trumas Meiser Rishon, I give it to a Levi. And the Levi separates the Trumas Meiser. We are going to follow those who hold that at least post facto, in the Bavli we had even Lachatchila. Here we're going to have at least one shita that post facto, if I, the Yisrael, before giving the Meiser Rishon to a Levi, I separate Trumas Meiser, I do that, and I give it to a Kohen, or I just separate Trumas Meiser, I am able to do so.
The Levi doesn't have to do.
No, and then what the Levi gets, he already gets tithed product. Based on that, it makes sense, because when I make a commitment, I'm giving this to Nasano, I know that as far as the gift is not yet yours. But since I am able to separate Trumas Meiser, if you declare it into Trumas Meiser, we look at you like my shliach vis-a-vis the Trumas Meiser. Shlichus could be appointed without a kinyan. Shlichus is a declaration that I, the principal, make that you can act on my behalf. Now, even though I did not explicitly make you into my shliach, fakert, I made a commitment to give you a gift of my sedition. But we know that my sedition needs to have Trumas Meiser separated from it, and even more, like in our story, Meiser Rishon could be transformed by the Levi entirely into Trumas Meiser. How? Like in our story. If I have one koir of Meiser Rishon, but if the Levi has another 9, or if I have another 9 of Meiser Rishon, something that could be Meiser Rishon can also become entirely Trumas Meiser. Now, I want to make it clear. According to the opinions that say that a Yisrael owner cannot make Meiser Rishon into Trumas Meiser, then this answer doesn't work. Because as far as the gift of the commitment is concerned, that I'll give you the Meiser Rishon, there's no kinyan there. But implied in that, that's a gavaldik achab. Mekiv and she'amaloi koir Meiser yesh l'cha biyadi. That commitment has sublated in it, that you can be like my shliach. And based on the rule that I can separate it entirely as Trumas Meiser, so can you. Nimsa ketoinem bereshus Yisrael. It's mamish equal to appointing the Levi to be his shliach to separate Trumas Meiser. That it's yours, and you can separate Trumas Meiser on my behalf. It's not yours, but you can do it. Now, once you did it as a shliach, that's why we compared it to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin. Aviv doesn't own my produce, but if I appointed him to be my shliach and he separated the truma and then I nullified the shlichus, too late. Gavaldik. And now must be.
Rabbi,
yes.
Can you just clarify one thing? Because I'm struggling to kind of hold this in my head.
Yes.
The obligation of Trumas Meiser is really on the Levi, right? Not on the Yisrael.
That's exactly what we are challenging.
So when we say that the Yisrael is allowed to separate it, according to that opinion,
yes,
does he have to first have a Levi that he's planning on giving it to,
no,
or he can
not
separate
according to
it?
Rabbi Yossi. You know, let's also look at this whole Trumas U'Meiseres not as a chiyuv gavra but a chiyuv chefza that fits in today's daf, because we just spoke about the non-Jew. The non-Jew for sure has no obligation to separate anything. Yet, according to the Tanoim that hold that ein king and la'akum be'eretz Yisrael la'afkiyah, the produce has to have something separated from it. Let's look at it from that perspective. This produce needs to have 2% to the coin. It needs to have 10% to the Levi's Meiser Rishon has to have from it 10% going for a coin, separating and giving. And the Gemara says that this answer is based pasar law like Rabbi Yossi. Gavaldik. Just to know, in the Bavli, in Gittin, Daf Lamed Amud Beis, the Gemara there quotes the Tana Abba Elazar ben Gamla that holds that a Yisrael owner, Danny, lechatchila can separate Trumas Meiser. Lechatchila. That's not the understanding of the Yerushalmi. Here we're following Rabbi Yossi. The Rabbi Yossi Amar, Balabayisi post facto, B'diavad, Shetaram es ha-Meisris. By the way, Meisris doesn't only mean Meiserishin. If he separated all of the Meisris, what's all of the Meisris? Also, Trumas Meiser. So Rabbi Yossi says, Masha asa asui. And let's chaparain, let's go to the next statement. Now, let's get another memra. You know what the word memra means? What does memra mean? Memra is when we're quoting a statement from an Amoira. So there's another statement of Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rabbi Yanai. This is the third one we're having today. Yisrael she'amar leben Levi. If a Yid tells to a Levi, Koid Meiser yesh lecha biyadi, same case we had before so far. And the way he words this, in other words, I have a koid that I separated as my sedition, and I'm telling you a gift that the koid that I have, you have it in my possession. But here again, no kinyan is made. It is a commitment. V'heilach lecha damav. But now the Yisrael adds something. Now, really, there's a machlokes tanoim whether Meiser Rishon has inherent kedusha, meaning can a Yisrael eat Meiser Rishon? Almost all of the opinions, we hardly ever quote this machlokes, including our Gemara. We're going with the opinion that unlike Truma, that has holiness in it, only a kohen can eat it. Meiser Rishon is a monetary gift, but there is no kedusha there. That means once it's given to a Levi, anyone can buy it from a Levi and eat it. So the original owner is telling Levi, the kohen of produce, I'm going to give to you. I'm going to. It's yours. It's yours. And you know what? Let me already buy it from you. Vehelach lecha damav. Okay. And the Levi accepted the money for all the meiser. Now, let me ask you a question. Does all the meiser belong to you? If I did not separate Trumas Meiser, then you cannot benefit from all of the money. That's the topic over here. In other words, Nisano, is your presumption, may you presume that since I gave you money, I, prior to the koid, already separated Trumas Meiser, and what remained is a koid, and therefore all of the money is yours? Or no? Atazoi. So choishesh letrumas meiser shabai. He has to be concerned. Gewaldig. So says the Marafulda. Look inside the Marafulda, 5 lines from the bottom of the Amid. Choishesh haben halevi yunesanel b'damimelu. You can't just categorically benefit from all of the money. You have to be concerned. Now, how do you resolve the concern? You're right. If I'm available, if I'm trustworthy, you ask me. Sometimes I won't be available. In other words, there's a problem. Mishum trumas umayse. The chayshinan, because we are afraid. Dilma loikaram balabais trumas meiser shabai. Now, by the way, what would be the solution? The solution doesn't have to be money. The solution would be that the Levi, here in our case example, Nisano, will separate from his own meiser rishon trumas meiser for this produce. The value, okay. Says the Gemara, hold on, kahadam. And this follows the following incident that Eloi Faisa, look at the names we have in the Yerushalmi. You're not going to have this name in the Bavli. Eloi Faisa gave to Rab Shimon bar Abba Maisen. Now I want to say like this, Rab Shimon bar Abba, we know, was a kohen. And reminding everyone, Bekitzer, we have 2 more minutes, that certainly during the era of Ezra, and according to many during the Second Temple era, since when Ezra inspired Jews to move back to our Holy Land, when he was involved in the building of the Second Temple, very, very few Levium went with him. So he penalized the Levium. How did he penalize them? He said that all of the Meiser Rishon should be given to a Kohen, which makes sense. You know why? Because a Kohen is also a Ben Levi. Okay, just explaining why. Rab Shimon bar Abba is a kohen. The story was Eloi Fasa gave Rab Shimon bar Abba his meiser rishon, and Amar le Mesukanu, and he told the recipient, "I want you to know, he didn't give it to him as a kohen. He gave it to him as a Levi, but he told him, you don't have to worry to separate 10% from what you received. I already did it." Now, also Shal Rabbi Yochanan, What was the question? He wanted to know whether he can rely on such a claim. Amaleni told him that Eloi Fasa Achinu is Neman. Again, he's a trustworthy person. We're not going to get into how that becomes. And therefore, you can rely on him. Okay. Which means, what does that mean? That if he's not a trustworthy person, then you have to be choishish. Maybe he didn't separate it. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Isa, Boye, Kume, Rabbi Yochanan, Keman, again, this statement can only follow Rabbi Yosi. If you don't go like Rabbi Yosi, that means if you hold that the original owner, the Jew, can never separate Trumas Meiser. If you cannot do it, then of course the Rab Shimon Bar Abba would have to separate Trumas Meiser. And even though Rabbi Yosi holds that lechatchila, the Levi, the recipient, should be the one doing it, but b'di'evet it's good. That weiter. That what? Rabbi Yosi Omer, Balabai, Shotorah Masa Maisris, Masha Asa. We'll stop over here. Oh, one second. In other words, he's asking, is it because you follow Rabbi Yosi, Davav Amid Beis, says Rabbi Yochanan, Amalei, so who did he make this statement to? To Rabbi Isa. I want you to know that Rabbi Isa is Rav Asi. Rav Asi was born in Bavel, and he moved to the Holy Land, and he was called the Babylonian. That's the meaning today. Today, you can live in LA for all these years, but if you came from Brazil, you're Brazilian. They called him you Babylonian. So Amalei, so he says, good. Bavloi kam to alei. The Babylonian, good verstanden. Correct statement. That all of these statements are predicated on Rabbi Yochanan subscribing to that which we know, b'shem Rabbi Yosi, that the Trumas Meiser, at least b'di'evet, post facto, could be separated by the Yisrael, the original owner.